By way of introducing today's video, we thought we'd start here on Upper Oak Street near the northern edge of the Champlain village boundary, about a mile from the Canadian border. This historic marker, placed here in 1938, site of the birthplace of Yehudi Ashman, born April 21st, 1794. First colonization agent at Liberia, Africa, 1822 to 1828. We're starting with Yehudi because his birth date in 1794. We have this here, William Beaumont, 1807 to 1810. Someone born in 1794 would probably meant that he would have been in the schoolroom with Dr. William Beaumont. Today's program is going to be about Dr. William Beaumont. This is the area where the first school in Champlain stood. It's a little further down Oak Street, closer to the Champlain Learning Center. In his first school, which stood near this site, Dr. William Beaumont, surgeon and physiologist, was schoolmaster from 1807 to 1810. The Beaumonts, William's parents were Samuel and Lucretia. Samuel had two brothers who also fought in the American Revolution alongside of him. They were William and Daniel. They both moved to Champlain. William Jr. here, Dr. William Beaumont, later came here and joined them. So his parents didn't help found the town of Champlain, but his uncles did. And now we're going to move on and learn more about Dr. William Beaumont and his importance in history. We are inside Meadowbrook in just a grand ballroom or something like that.
Yeah, the grand room.
The grand room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no dancing today.
No, not yet, but it's good. It's great for presentations.
Okay, and your title, Helen Nurskill, with the
director
of Clinton County.
Clinton County Historical Association, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And museum.
And museum.
Yeah. Now, you're involved with is it Fedi, his last name, Dr. Fedi.
Yes,
okay.
yes. He gives some wonderful presentations on
Okay.
William Beaumont. That story is one of our local stories.
Yes,
and
it is.
Yes, and it's a very important one for us to remember. And he does a great job sharing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and it's a great story. I started with a trip up Oak Street in Champlain. I got the Yehudi Ashman plaque because the founder of Liberia was probably a student of William Beaumont. Then I went to the William Beaumont plaque and gave a little introduction to what we're doing here today.
Yeah.
Now, what happens if there's somebody out there who has a great presentation in mind and they don't know how to present it?
Well, they should call me
you.
because we really are trying to share everybody's work. You know, we had Pat Luckin from the Kent Deloitte House speak. I have Jackie Madison from the North Star Underground Railroad. We're really like to do that. So, and we have lots of opportunities to share our history, and sort of that's our mission anyway, right? Just to share history. Right. So
and preserve it.
Yeah.
Because if we don't do this, nobody else is going to do it. So it's very important that we do this while
and we have lots
people.
of opportunities. You know, we do it twice a month here. We do it once at the Senior Center on North Catherine and at Lake Forest. So, and we're going to be bringing presentations back into CCHA also. So so we're just and some are repeats, but you know, that's okay because you're only talking maybe to 50 people. Well, there are a whole bunch of, there's 2,000 out there that haven't heard it, so we don't mind repeating them either.
And if you have heard it, maybe you want to hear it again. Who knows?
Yeah, no, it's very good.
So Facebook, you have a Facebook page. People can contact you through that.
They can.
The website.
Yep, Clinton County Historical, and then we have actually our Civil War. We have 3 Facebook pages. Yes, we do. Yeah,
Julie
one's on
Dowd's
Bluff.
been so busy.
Oh, I know, she's wonderful. But we have have the Bluff Point Lighthouse Facebook page, our Clinton County Historical Association, and the Civil War soldiers. And we have listed, actually, this is way off topic, but I think she's done over 2,500 bios of Civil War veterans who enlisted in Clinton County. So, wow, huh? Yeah.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And
of course, they didn't all come from Clinton County. They may have traveled to enlist here.
that's
some
right,
of them.
or they're enlisted or they're buried here.
right.
You know, so whatever the connection is, she pulls it in and then she tells their story. So, and she's very good with genealogy. So, this is like an ad for our Facebook page.
Normally, when you're saying very good, you're accurate. But with Julie, very good, it doesn't quite cover it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
She is great.
She is great. Yeah.
Looks like a full house here. Nice to see.
We have around 40 that people come, some from outside because everybody's invited. The public's invited.
Right.
So it's and certainly there's no other way we could maybe talk to some people, because if they're here, they are not going to be, at Lake Forest, at CCHA. So it's an opportunity we like.
Yeah, in the background, I see my friend Louis Bedard, who owns Dewey Tavern in Champlain, and there's not a more historic building in the county, according to what was written a few years back, than the Dewey Tavern in Champlain. So you can look around here and you find a lot of familiar faces.
That's right. And Dick Ward's here, and he's on many boards, that we're involved with. Yeah.
So much history in his collection.
That's right.
Okay. We won't hold up the good doctor. Well, thank you for chatting with us. And the next thing you hear should be the doctor.
I'm Helen Durska. I'm the director of the Clinton County Historical Association and Museum. I'm here again. I recognize faces now. Thank you for having us. We have a very special guest today. Dr. Fedi, Paola Fedi, is the local expert on William Beaumont. The William Beaumont story is it's a Plattsburgh story, county story, so I'm very happy to be able to share that with you today. And I think it's ready.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm trying to talk loud. If you cannot hear me, let me know. So I have to thank Helen here from the Clinton County Historical Association in Meadowbrook to allow me today to come here to talk to you about a subject that is really close to my heart and also to my job. Over the next 40 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about William Beaumont. He was a doctor that practiced here in the early 1800s in this town. He was not only a doctor, but he also was a scientist, and he had an incredible role in the understanding on how the gastrointestinal tract worked. So, the story of Beaumont, it really started in Mackinac Island. I don't know if you know where this island is. So, it's strategically placed in between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. This was an important island, an important post for the military of the United States during the American Revolution. And therefore, there has always been remained an important post, as you can see here, with the border with Canada. Lake Michigan is all in the United States, but Lake Huron is it's half of the Canadian and half of the United States. This post that was in there, and the town that is on Mackinac, was not only a military base, but also had civilian at that time. And in particular, there was an important place. It was the base for the American Fur Association, which basically was trading the fur from Canada down to the United States, and they were using beaver to make the hats that actually were famous at that time. I forgot to bring you one of those hats. Actually, I do have one. So, if you ever seen one of the images of the Titanic, you remember that those were the kind of hats that actually were making from taking the fur from the Canadians from that time. And this was the base from John Jacob Astor. That's what the base of the fur company did. So, Beaumont, how did he arrive in this island? He was born actually in Connecticut. Lebanon, Connecticut, on November 21st, 1785. He was born from a family of farmers. As you can know, many of you probably had children, did not want to do the job of their parents. So he decided to move out of the house and actually end up in Champlain, New York. So how did he end up there? So he came with his cousin, Samuel, and both arrived in Champlain. Two of his uncles, they were Revolutionary War veterans, and they actually were the settler of Moors and Champlain. So he arrived there all excited, but unfortunately he did not really have any trade or to do a professional job. But he was well educated, and therefore the only job that he could do really is to teach. So if you go to Rouse's Pond in Champlain on Oak Street, there is this sign here that actually it reminds us of Beaumont, where he was teaching at the first school. Unfortunately, all the records, I think, of that time burned down, so we don't really have a good documentation, I think, of the from where he was there, except a few letters that he was sending home. Beaumont was an avid reader, and he was very interested and started reading particularly books on science and medicine. So he started borrowing books from Dr. John Pomeroy in Burlington, who was a physician that actually founded the medical school there. And so slowly he realized that probably that's what he wanted to do to become a doctor. At that time, to become a doctor, you needed really to have an apprenticeship with somebody. And so he found a doctor, Dr. Chandler, in St. Alban. You know that St. Alban is just across Champlain, and basically he spent there 2 years, and then in 1812, he was able to obtain his license to practice medicine. 1812 immediately make us thinking about its time of war, and so therefore, the future for Beaumont, now that he has his license, it became a little uncertain because he was not sure what was really going to happen during the war, how he could practice medicine. And at that time, the military really were recruiting, not only recruited to fight, but also physicians to take care of the hospital. So he became employed by the United States Army. And so he was part of the 6th Regiment Infantry under the General Dearborn of the Army of the North. So he did participate in the war in 1812, although not really in Plattsburgh, as he was transferred to other area to fight at the border with Canada in St. George on Niagara, on the lake, and in York, Toronto. And he was mentioned for bravery. After the war ended, however, Beaumont realized that I think his career in the army may have been going towards an end because the war was ending. The United States didn't have much money because it has paid for all the war in there, and there was rumor that perhaps they would stop paying doctors, and money that was coming from Washington up to for him for salary, they were always delayed. Therefore, he decided to actually open a practice on his own, and he opened a practice downtown in Plattsburgh. This is actually, it's very interesting, with an advertisement in the Plattsburgh Republican of December 15, 1815. You can see here that Dr. Beaumont, with a colleague, Dr. Center, decided to open an office for practicing medicine. Here you can see there is this written store and drug, medicine, and grocery. At that time, an office of a physician was really same in a grocery store, because many of the drug at that time was not really a true pharmacy. There were herbs or other remedies or oils and other things in there. So it was all combined most of the time with a kind of grocery store. If you go now downtown to Plattsburgh, between Margaret Street and Bridge Street, you can see that there is this plaque here that was placed in 1929 by the physician hospital at that time, in memory, I think, of Beaumont, where his office was. Basically, it will be by a furniture store that is there right now. So Beaumont continued there for 4 years. but he re-enlisted into the army 4 years later. It's not because he didn't have any business. Actually, he had quite a lot of work, and he was quite busy and had a very good reputation as a doctor. But his friend, Dr. Joseph Lovell, he became the Surgeon General of the United States. And he was a friend of Beaumont because they met here in Plattsburgh. So therefore, he asked Beaumont if he could come back and basically would have given a station in many of the posts along the border to protect the border from Canada. So Beaumont did agree to come back to the army, and finally we are going back to Mackinac. He was stationed in the island there. And Beaumont went there for 1 year, and then he came back to Plattsburgh. Now remember, he's a young man, and what he needed to do, he needed to build a family. And so therefore, what he did, came back to Plattsburgh and married Deborah Green Platt. I don't know if all these names really say something to you, but actually when you go downtown during the time of the Battle of Plattsburgh, you actually will hear the name of Israel Green and the Tavern. So the Tavern of Israel Green are really the father of Deborah Green, who was the wife of Beaumont. And actually, Beaumont will have 4 children, and his last child will name Israel Green for the grandfather. So now he has a new wife, and now they're going back to the Mackinac Island and to continue their life together, and as part of the army. So the entire story of Beaumont is really started on this day, June 6, 1822. So Beaumont is at his house at the base in Mackinac Island on the fort, and his wife is 9 months pregnant. 2 days later, she will actually deliver the child, Sarah, who is the first child of Beaumont. Somebody from the far company that was there, from the Canadian side, came to ask for help, as apparently at the local tavern there was an accident, and one of the voyeurs, that means the person that was bringing the fire from Canada to be sold there, was very ill. Beaumont left home and he went to the tavern in there, and when he arrived, he saw this man on the floor. He had a large wound open here on the left flank of his abdomen. Immediately he realized that this person will probably die very soon. He could see the lungs that was coming out of there. There was a rib cage that was sticking out, ribs that was sticking out from there, and the food that the person just ate, I think, was coming out of the stomach in there. So clearly, this was a horrific scene, I think, that was seen from everybody. So what really happened? Apparently there was a fight, a lot of drinking that was happening at that time, and therefore a shotgun wound that occurs. So somebody shot the person at close range and therefore created this large wound. Beaumont tried to attend these things, but clearly didn't think that the person would really make it through. And so he left him there, went back home, and then came back the next day because he was curious to see what had really happened at this point. The person was still there, was alive, and was feverish, very sick. The person is Alexis Saint-Martin from Quebec. He was posted there. His job was really to get beaver and try to sell it to the Americans. And so Beaumont took Alexis Saint-Martin and brought it to the military hospital at the base. So he continued, he tried to kind of help him, and if you remember at that time, we are talking about early 1800, there is no sterility, we don't even know what it is, there is no antibiotic, there's very little that you can do. Most of the physicians at that time were able to treat wound to the extremity by doing amputation, not really much surgery that was known at that time. But it seems like that Alexis was not really dying and continued to survive. So after 2 weeks, everybody, the fate of this Alexis was unclear. Why that? Two things that really happened. Alexis was employed by the Canadian. The Canadian didn't want to have anything to do with him because he couldn't really work. So they fired him. On the other hand, he was a Canadian. Now he's on the American soil, treated by American and paid by American. So the hospital decided, we're not going to have any more him here because we don't want to take all our resources to treat somebody that is not one of our own. So Beaumont did an incredible decision and decided to bring that home. He felt attached to this person because he had this big wound, and unfortunately, as a physician, we all try to help whoever is sick. So brought him at home and took care of him for the next year and a half. Now you think that the houses in Mackinac, they're not big home. Now he has a wife with a newborn child. I don't know if Deborah was so excited to have a man. She had to take care of a small little child that was just born, and now had a man lying down and not doing anything, and he had to take care of that. And therefore took care of him approximately for a year and a half. So as you can see here, these are the first drawing of Beaumont trying to describe a little bit, I think, what the wound and the process of healing was. Beaumont tried to make these things heal by putting pressure on the wound in there. He tried to remove the piece of the rib cage that was sticking out in this way, and slowly the things healed, but it never really closed because the gap was too big. It was approximately 12 inches from the beginning, and so clearly this is a wound that even now will be very difficult to treat. So this, in spring 1824, so approximately 2 years later, this is what we believe is the picture of what the wound would have been once it was healed at that time. So you can see there is a hole. There is a hole localized here in this area, just at the border with the rib cage and the starting of the abdomen. And normally, I think he was able to see the stomach through, but the stomach somewhat grew enough some tissue that partially created a seal. So when Alexis was drinking and eating, the food was not coming out, but was able to stay into the body. It is during that time that Beaumont realized how incredible had it been able for him to see this. He was able to observe directly the stomach, something that was never done before. An Italian group of scientists that really had predicted how somewhat the digestion occur inside of us. Maybe there is a chemical inside, but nobody could really prove it because unfortunately there is no way that you can actually see while you're eating what really happened inside. Many of the studies were done in animals, dogs for example, or cadaver that were open, but at that point the body is already decayed, so you will not be able to see it. So he at that point understood that he had an incredible opportunity and did not want to give it away, and therefore asked Alexis if he was willing to continue to stay with him, although at that point he was healthy and he would be able to go, to actually perform a series of experiments. So Beaumont, over the course of 8 years, he performed 200 experiments that started in May 1825. I just listed here the location where these experiments mostly did occur. The reason why they occur in different places is because Alexis was following Beaumont, and Beaumont, as part of the military, was transferred and moved in different places. Not only that, but also when he went to Washington and then finally back in Plattsburgh, he actually went to discuss some of his findings, and he required some further expertise to analyze the gastric juice. And that's when he went to Washington, D.C. and Virginia, where he went to discuss some of his results with other scientists. So between 1825 and the second set of experiments, is actually Alexis went back to Canada. He then married, had 2 children, and then he came back and he was joined again the Canadian Fur Company, and then that's when he reconnected again with Beaumont, and Beaumont was very happy because he wanted to continue the experiment. So Alexis came back from Canada. Now he has 2 children and a wife, and they came over and they stay in this area of Fort Crawford, Prairie du Chien in Upper Mississippi. And after this set of experiment in 1829, he actually went back to Canada, as apparently the wife was not really happy of staying in the area, and she missed family in Canada, so they went back to Canada again. And Beaumont contacted Alexis again later, 1832, with letters, and Alexis agreed to come back in the United States for more experiment done until 1833, where the 200 experiments were produced, where Beaumont finally published his information and collection of data that he collected with the observation and the conclusion of what was an incredible discovery that he had done. So what type of experiment he really did on Alexis? So 3 types of experiments were performed. The first one was a collection of the gastric juice. Nobody really was able to actually collect what really happened, what do you have in your stomach now? Because unfortunately, most of the study before were related to vomiting. So vomiting is not something that is very similar to vomit. You vomit when you're sick, not when you're really normal in a normal function. So he had a rubber tube that was inserted into the side of the Alexis, and he was able to collect the juice. So he could actually analyze it, take sample, and study the gastric juice. The second set of experiment is really the how we digest food. This was an incredible clever thing in there, if you think. So how do you know how you can collect a piece of meat? So he basically used a string, attached the string to the roller around the piece of meat, and then put it inside. And then 1 hour later, he was pulling it back to actually see what level of digestion it was. Put it back. So in this way, you could actually see it, how long it takes for us to digest food. Not only food, but other vegetable or other things in there. So he could actually study with time the digestion of things in there. So this is actually, it's incredible because we really didn't have any chance or any understanding of how actually we digest food and what's the difference between a piece of meat. There is meat and meat, correct? You know venison, you know pork, you know chicken. Some is more fat, some is less fat. And the third set of experiment was really observing. Look inside. How do they look, the intestine now at different times? So this is the book that he was published in 1833. The interesting thing is that this book was published locally. So this is not published by a big university or big things in there. It was published by actually the newspaper company that was locally there. In fact, if you had a chance opportunity to see one of these products, it is actually a poor quality. They are binded with a string. The label is glue attached to things in there because unfortunately the newspaper don't have the capacity of printing as you do a book. And it's in octavo form, which is basically, it's a similar size to this. That's similar to an octavo size. And it's 280 pages in there. There is an incredible amount of information that is in there. He published 1,000 of this book. Most of them were given away to other doctors. And quickly, this became a big, not a seller because he didn't make much money out of these things because most of them were given away. But then the information that was in there incredibly when moved around through the planet. The book was published in German because they couldn't understand English, all this knowledge. It was also published in Edinburgh in Scotland, so it could reach also Europe. A second edition was then printed in Burlington, but Beaumont did not really make any profit for that. This was done by his cousin, Samuel, much later. So this is actually, it's an interesting, I just highlighted a few little pieces in there just to have you an idea of what he was writing. So if it's bear with me a few seconds, I can read some of this. So, for example, we can read, let's go there. July 16, 7 o'clock, 30 minutes a.m. Weather is cloudy, wind, west, light, temperature 73, stomach empty, temperature of the stomach 101, after rising and before exercising. 9 o'clock p.m., weather cloudy, exercising. Damp and chilly the weather. Temperature is 70. The next day, another day, July 28th, the weather is clear, the stomach is empty. It's not healthy. Some erythema, which means redness, and aphthous patches. These are like a little ulcer that sometimes you have it in your mouth, that you have it in there. San Martin has been drinking ardent spirits pretty freely for 8 or 10 days past. Complain of no pain, nor show symptoms of any general indisposition. Says he feels well and has a good appetite. August 1st, we can go to another section here. At 9 o'clock, he breakfasted on boiled, usually it was kind of like a piece of meat that they were using at the time, mostly was beef, and then fat pork, so he was cooked on that with fat pork, and bread. At 12, so he's looking to see, I think, what happened there. The stomach is 2/3 empty. The temperature is 100 and a fraction. Now he's going back at 2 o'clock. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon, stomach is nearly empty. Very little pulp or bread, and lardaceous fluid to be seen. Has just returned from walking 2 miles or more. The temperature of the stomach is 100. So you can see the amount of detail and the amount of information I think that he put. That over the course of these 8 years, he was able then to make an incredible amount of conclusion about how our intestine and how our stomach function. So I'm going to go over with you over the next 4 slides about what are the most important of the summary of the finding, I think, of Beaumont. And I will just give you some perspective, I think, how these apply to today. So Beaumont major observation, I think, the major one was really that digestion occurred through a chemical reaction of acid that is contained in the gastric juice. It seems silly to us that, oh, we have acid in the stomach. But up to this time, and this is 1833, this was not known. We always believed that the stomach was somewhat a churning of and fermentation of food, that people were putting in there, the stomach was squeezing, something happened, and then everything was going down into the intestine. But actually, he was able to demonstrate it, that the gastric juice really contained hydrochloric acid or muriatic acid, as we call them, I think, when we are at home. There is mucus and there is some other substance into the gastric juice, but thanks to the acid is that what we digest. How he could prove that was very easy. Remember the tube that he put into the stomach? He was able to collect it. Now I can put the acid into the glass tube, put it in there, put the food in there, and see what happened. He could actually prove it that there was the same digestion that occurred in the stomach or in the tube at the same time. So you didn't really need much more in the stomach. It's just the presence of this acid that actually was there. So this was an incredible finding for the time. And digestion really can occur also outside of the stomach. And the movement of the stomach really had the function mostly to make mixing the acid that is produced by the wall of the stomach with the food. So in this way, they all the food can be exposed. Another important information, I think, was this one here outlined there, that is a mental disturbances has a profound influence on the secretion of gastric juice and digestion. This is actually a concept that at that time may or may not be understood so much, but we still struggle today. When you are pissed off, when you are not feeling good, when you are tired, you actually your stomach doesn't work very well. And you know that your stomach is upset, correct? I mean, you know that you haven't slept that much, or other things in there. So this can affect how you actually function and how you digest in general. So digestion is not only disturbed by the emotion, but there is also other things that we do bad. Coffee, tea, alcohol. So we all believe we can't live without coffee. I mean, it's amazing that now it's part of who we are. But honestly, really, do we need it? No, really, we're not built because we need coffee. Maybe we should sleep more, or maybe we should work less. I don't know. But the excess of all these stimulants for the stomach really can cause some illnesses, as well as alcohol. Alcohol tend to cause trouble into the gastrointestinal tract for the multiple toxic effect, both by the alcohol directly and by increasing the secretion of acid. So another important things that we discussed here, you saw the food discussion about the things in there. So he was able to actually make a table of how long it takes for the milk, for venison, for brains, from tripe, from pig feet, to actually know how long it takes to digest this thing in there. So what conclusion do we have from this in there? It's actually that food that is greasy and more greasy food, oily, tend to take longer time to digest. We all have experienced that, correct? I mean, get the little pizza and the chicken wing and other things in there, yeah, you're gonna have a stomach that is full and you feel bloated and you feel distended because it will sit in the stomach for a longer time because it takes time to digest. Vegetable, many people come to my office and they always say, oh, I see the vegetable going through and see them in the stool. That is actually normal because the acid cannot really destroy what is made of, or what woods is made of, or what many of the fiber that actually are in vegetables. So if you don't chew them very well, you would be able to pass the pee all the way through the colon and go down into your stool. So that was another thing there. So oily food take a little longer time. Vinegar and salt tend, in small amount, tend to help the digest. Remember that vinegar is acetic acid. So it's another form of acid, so therefore it is already partially digested food and help the stomach to digest. Too much of that is bad, but a little is okay. Salt also can improve the effect of the acid on the effect of the on food. The other thing that actually Beaumont was able to demonstrate is that by doing a little bit of walking after you eat it, instead of just sitting like what we do after Thanksgiving meal, right? We had a big meal and then boom, we go to the recliner and we're sitting in there. That doesn't help with digestion. Have a little bit of standing, walking around. You do not want to go on a marathon or do many things in there, but doing a little bit of movement, it may help you because it may help you with circulation. So, another important concept that is here now that I mentioned Thanksgiving is really the quantity of food can affect the health of the stomach. So what does that mean? It means that the stomach disposes of a definite quantity of food. So you can eat whatever you want, but your stomach has a capacity of digesting a certain amount of food, and beyond that, you will not be able to continue to digest. So each of us, depends on the shape of our body, depends on how we're built, can digest food up to a certain point. So therefore, when you're overeating, some of the food will not be digested very well. And that's why we feel sick after that, because some of the food may now be not digested, going down to the gastrointestinal tract and disturb, I think, the function in general of the intestine. Another concept that is very important, I think that we always get confused, is that the liquid stay in the stomach longer than solid. So the theory that drinking water is good for you, go drink a little bit more, it's not really a good idea because it's actually delaying the stomach empty even more. So you kind of have to be helped. Drink when you're thirsty, drink when you can, but don't just force yourself to drink it just for the fun or because the neighbor tells you to do it, because it's not a good advice. Especially if you suffer of stomach problem. Also, heating sometimes helps. So sometimes having a little tea after that, or perhaps put a little warm blanket that many people do when they actually feel sick, or having a chamomile tea if your stomach is sick is actually helping because the heat can actually call for more blood in there, try to kind of help you with the digestive process. So as you can see, he was able to actually point it to a lot of information that they actually, for the time, was even too much advanced. We could not really even understand it. And we are still struggling today with many of the concepts that he was brought up. So how do we take all this information that we have and how we do apply to our daily life? So we use this word that is called dyspepsia. When you have, many people call it a stomach ache. My stomach doesn't really work today, or I don't feel too good in it. And basically what it is the effect of overeating, over drinking. So we knew that even at that time, many of the disease that actually we have with the GI tract now is self-inflicted. We do too many things. We tend to focus on eating. And I think the blame is, yes, it's our brain, but on the blame is also on advertising, temptation, correct? They always bring you a cookie and they always bring you something else, and who doesn't want ice cream and who doesn't? So every time they offer you something, you have to think about it, that maybe it's not always, don't give in on all the things that actually try to offer you. So another thing that was really important was kind of the systemic illnesses. So COVID was a classic example. We saw many of during that time is that as you get ill and you get an infection into the body, your intestine, it doesn't work very well during that time. The intestine tells you, I'm not working very well right now. So force ourselves to eat during the time of illness, it may not be the best option, although everybody tells you to do it, because the stomach will not work very well during that time. The capacity of emptying of the stomach, it tends to go down during systemic illnesses. So Beaumont have this incredible information. Now it's all outside and published. And then what happens, like the entire medical society from different universities and places reach out to him, come over to work with us, bring Alexis with him. So a lot of letters and information were sent to Alexis to actually to come and continue experiment that could have been done further in the United States. So Beaumont, however, did not really feel the need to do that. He completed his work, he felt good about it, and then he decided that it was not really, the academic society was not really the right place for him. So he continued to be in the army, but after 4 years, he basically resigned, and he was stationed at the time in St. Louis, and then he continued practicing medicine there. Unfortunately, he died early on April 25th, 1853. We know that actually he was attending to a patient and he slept on ice, and then he fell this way and knocked his head, and unfortunately did not make it through that. So now the curiosity here is kind of like, what happened to Alexis? He had a hole in the stomach, he was such a famous guy, what really happened to him? And here his story. So after he finished this experiment, he went back to Canada. He actually is the town that, if you look at the map, is Montreal is here. It's actually northeast of Montreal, and it's called Saint Thomas de Joliet. Maybe I don't pronounce as well because I'm not good in French. But he worked as a wood chopper. That's what his job. He was very good at that. So despite having this incredible wound, I mean, he was very healthy, I think, to do it. And we know that he was healthy because he had 22 children. So who want to have 22 children? And so he died actually at the age of 87 in 1881. What we know from the exchange letter from the family of Alexis is that he was terrified that after his death, people will be interested in his body and they want to go back and resume our things in there. So what they did actually after he died, they left him for a week exposed in a church there. So in this way, his body was completely degraded. And then he was put at rest in a place that was unknown. So nobody knew where actually this place was, so nobody could really do it. So we actually learned that it was in the town, it was in the cemetery church of the St. Thomas de Joliet. And he revealed only in 1962, so 60 years ago, by one of the granddaughter that wanted to put a plaque in the town to remember this important person, I think, that was in there, which basically was the great-grandfather. And so that's what we know. So this is another interesting story that I want to discuss with you. If you hear around that there is some ghost tour in town here, many people actually have fun about Beaumont. So I don't know if I said anything to you that is fun about this guy so far. I mean, he seems like a pretty serious guy and did quite a lot of work and things in there. So is Beaumont an American villain or a hero in the medical history? So let's dissect this a little bit and see if you can consider. So first things is that Beaumont really did not gain any money or social status. Why he will do that to not making any money? So he paid himself for 1,000 books that were published, and Most of them were given away. So did not make money ever. He did not take any academic position. He never really became professor at Harvard or professor in other major places at that time. And so he did not really gain any status. He went to St. Louis and continued practicing there with his 4 children, actually 3, because one actually died, and it's here in the cemetery in Plattsburgh. And he continued to practice medicine there and continued to do his work. As I mentioned to you, he died while he was working. The other thing is that he really did not cause the injury, so he did not create the stone. Many people argue that why Beaumont, as a doctor, did not fix it. Well, 12 inches of a wound that you have here, with your lung sticking out and things in there, I actually doubt that many surgeons here today at CVPH will be able to do a better job than what actually happening there. You cannot really heal very well. You will require a massive plastic surgery to transplant skin to actually cover the gap in there. It also will require surgery. Again, we are in 1820. We have no sterility. There is no surgery. There is no knowledge on how to actually do any of these things in there. It's not that Beaumont was trained to do any of these things in there. Also, I explained to you what the experiment, and I read it to you, I think, what he was really doing. So, did really Alexis was suffering of these things? Probably Alexis was annoyed by these things in there. He was there, every 2 hours, somebody has to go look at. But on the other hand, you also have to remember that he was paid. So none of these things were done for free. Beaumont kept it for 2 years in his house, gave him food, gave him assistance. When actually, every time that Alexis came back from Canada, the United States Army paid a salary to him and pay a place for his family and children when actually came here. So this is not done all for the American abusing the Canadian guy. So everything was done in a very correct way. And Alexis was not really kept in captivity. As you saw here, 4 times he's went back to Canada. 4 times he came back to us. So he had the opportunity and choice, I think, to actually to do that. And as I mentioned to you, I wrote it down here, he received really a salary for this. So I think at this point we really have to consider Beaumont the hero of Plattsburgh. He is considered in the medical society the father of the gastric physiology. It's interesting that Europe at that time, medicine in Europe was a bit more advanced than in the United States, and people were doing a lot of incredible amount of research and stuff. But somebody that was in Plattsburgh was able to accumulate more information than anybody ever accumulated, like in the history of in Europe in medicine, and then finally demonstrated all these things in there. And so after that, he created an incredible boom to understanding the physiology of the stomach and the function, how we work. So the other thing is that many of you have heard the word irritable bowel syndrome. And actually, that's what he described it. That's what it is. So what is the irritable bowel syndrome? Is that the fact that how can we deal with our environment and how our gastrointestinal tract really deal with the environment that we eat? How do we deal with food? How do we deal with emotion? And that is really what irritable bowel syndrome. The intestine has a nerve system that is as bigger than this in the brain that is called autonomic system, and it functions on its own. And so it will depend on emotion. We all know. Sometimes we get upset, we want to have the ice cream. Or sometimes we get upset, we don't want to eat because we feel upset about it. And eating is not what we want. And the other thing, it really gives us the basis to understand how food really, what the role of food really is in the function of our GI tract. So with this, I'm going to conclude the talk. I'm hoping that I gave you some kind of information that will give you enough to understand, I think, how important was this man and how it's important for us that we live in Plattsburgh and we have this figure so important for our history. So I hope that you enjoy. If you have any question right now on anything, I'm available here for you.
Thank you, Dr.
Any question? I know there's a lot to digest, and talking very fast. Yeah.
How do you think he was able to go so long without that wound becoming
Did he have
infected?
22 children?
Oh, yes, he did have 22
He
children.
did have 22.
Yes. So he must have been a pretty active guy and pretty busy in Canada. He didn't have any children. No children were down in the United States. They're all Canadian.
Yeah, good.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering, how could he have gone so long without the wound becoming infected over a period of
Yep.
time, getting dirt in it or sweat or anything that might
Right.
cause an
So
infection?
the wound was infected. The wound got infected and infected. He was septic, I think, from the description that we have. He has extremely high fever that lasted for more than 10 days. It was very hot. I think Alexis was a very strong, probably has a very, I mean, he was a hunter, right? He was going to get and a young man that was hunting beaver to actually bring them over. So we know for sure that in order to survive sepsis, you need to have a good heart. And so, and be young. And the infection, I think, what the remedy they have at that time is really to pack it, right? So this way to prevent the things in there. Probably, I suspected that the presence of acid and the leaking of acid. Remember, acid causes sterility. That's what makes your food, when you ingest it, to sterilize. So the function of the acid is really incredible for us, and it's important that it's just right away present, the first things in there, not only for digestion, but because when you eat an apple, you eat the fruit, or you eat anything else, there's plenty of bacteria on it. And some of this bacteria may be bad for you. But if you have enough acid, you will destroy and kill them. So leaking of those through, it would probably allow to actually have enough things to do. Luckily, he didn't have any mold or other things in there that could survive also in an acid environment. Remember that it took a year and almost 2 years to actually reach the stage of heat. So that's quite a lot of things in there. So that's, yes, it's an incredible opportunity. I mean, this is not something that it's easy. Oh, I'm gonna have a wound and then I'll study you. This is not easy. That's why I think Beaumont was such a clever person, because he was there at the right time, but he couldn't miss it. Who told that the physician was like, why am I gonna deal with this guy? He's Canadian, he's in my house, I have a wife, I have a child. I mean, if you have a child that is a week old, I mean, a few days old, actually it was born after. So and now you have to deal with a man that is gonna, on a stretcher in your house, and who do you think was doing some of the packing? The wife probably, correct? I mean, so, but, and so that it required quite a long time. I think so was it 2 years of attending the wound, I think that allowed to do it. And so that's when he realized this opportunity that he would have given an incredible amount of science information. This is why he's really a scientist. Because everybody can be a doctor, but not understanding how important is that information that he could get gained from this guy. And so he has to make this decision. As you can see, he was not really a researcher. He was not really a scientist. Because when they after this, could you believe it, the opportunity, he would have made a chair of Harvard or Princeton. I mean, he could have gone in these major places, academic, to continue. But that was not him. He was not really interested in that. He was not really wanting to continue the things in there. So, but unfortunately, he did not pass on this incredible, it was given to him on a silver platter. Hi, look at this. So think about it. The endorsement became available in 1970. So it's only that time that we could actually look at a live person, put the tube down, and look inside what happened when you're eating or when you're fixing it. Before that, you couldn't do it. They were doing it in dogs. And you can compare yourself to it. We do many studies on mice, but they never really reflect who we are. And then, but also, how can you study emotion and stuff? I mean, that's a very hard topic. We know that I think a wound can, the body, it's pretty resilient. I think we are built to survive, and we have a healing capacity of doing. And it's not that my medical knowledge doesn't make me think that it's impossible for him to survive. He had a chance to survive. He probably was a very strong person. Yeah. Is that a miracle? No. It's just that. And also, the good news is that he never really had an injury of his vital organ, that means the aorta. Because if you get the gunshot wound, so as you can see, like in the movie, when people die there, they have something in the center. So remember, the heart is here and the major vessel here. If that would have been affected, any of these organs, he would have been dead at the time. There was no way they would survive. But this was kind of the trajectory. This way, gradually. So you go this way, and so therefore, this is the area where you have the spleen, you have the lung, and you have the stomach. So this is all a combination of things that brought all these things in there. The right pattern of the wound, the right time, the right doctor, the right place, and probably maybe going in a house where there is a child, maybe they were clean enough, like, you know. So yeah. And as far as food, I think what is important is that he was leaking food from the beginning. So initially, the description, I didn't go in detail, but they were packing it with gauzes, and basically were linen. Gauzes at the time were linen that was washed and air dried on the sun, and then you put them up on the heat in there and press it down, so in this way you keep the fluid there, because otherwise you will be die of dehydration, because the acid will come out. And then slowly, the stomach, kind of like it created some kind of like and it kind of stopped the from leaking and also positioning. In this way, you can keep the food in there. So it was all running in. Yep. Any other questions?
You guys can, as long as you have time, if you guys have more questions, we're going to slowly bring residents out just to get them ready for their next.
I'm available. You can ask me any question. Yep.
What point did gastroenterology actually become a specialty, like where somebody goes to med school and says, I want to specialize? Like in what decade was that actually a specialty?
Oh, okay. So I'm not sure that I know exactly when the gastroenterologist was become a specialist. So this is myself, a gastroenterologist. We are internists.
Right.
So somebody confuses us with surgeon. We're not surgeons, so I'm an internist. So internist means we take care of all these organs that are here. Kidney, heart, things in there. So it's all part of the internal medicine. Internal because it basically it's what the abdomen is part of in there. Gastroenterology, until this time, it was impossible to understand many things in there because it was the time of, actually the big boom of gastroenterology was with endoscopy. So we're talking about the 1970s, in which then become a major effort because now with the tube, I can actually go down. And so the gastroenterologists actually were mostly liver specialists. And so it was all combined with hepatology and gastroenterology. And in fact, the majority of the gastroenterology, they are well known, like in England, or things in there, they're mostly hepatology because they tend to have more like a liver specialty because it's an organ, right? I mean, it's here. We know what it is. We have information from a long time. The liver can regenerate it. Things can do it. So it was much more fascinating than this. Stool never had fascination with anybody. So we take a little, and you can see that we struggle with these things again. It's very difficult to talk about the anus with people. Men don't want to talk about it. Or hemorrhoids. It's like the H word. I mean, it's kind of we struggle even with that. So think about even at that time, or Victorian time, how we can actually talk about the function of the bowel. This was all related. But unfortunately, it is. So I saw an interesting exhibition in Quebec last year. It was called. Sorry for the. Are you still kidding? It was called "Oh Shit," and it was actually incredible. The amount of history that is around stool and how the planet is working around the stool in general, because it is a major thing. I mean, how do we dispose of these things in here? So remember that in Europe, I mean, you can still go to the houses in Florence, the bathroom is sticking out this way, and basically was a hole. The stool was coming in on the street. But then, in order to make the civilization, we're going to have to put piping. And where do we put all this? So we have to create a path to actually go. So that was an incredible foundation for things in there. Actually, the town of Pompeii in Italy you go there, they already thought it through about these things. So kind of like, we don't really learn anything from history. And that brings me to the point that that's why I like to talk about these things, because it's 1830, and he tells us a lot of information about that are still valid and are still with struggle, I think, is in there. So to answer your question, I'm not really quite sure when, but we know that is an important function of the GI tract. When exactly it became a specialty, I'm not sure. So now, in order to become a gastroenterologist, you need to do a training in internal medicine and complete it. So you are an internist. And then you do another training on gastroenterology. So you don't start from the beginning as a gastroenterologist, you need to be an internist, and then it's the same in cardiology. You do an internal medicine first, and then you go to and now we call them subspecialty, in which basically we're going to focus on this. But in order to understand the function of the GI tract, you need to have knowledge of kidney. You need to have knowledge, since we're talking about gossiping a little bit here, so why do we need to have knowledge of kidney as a gastroenterologist? What birds do? They poo and pee from the same hole. So the moment that you actually are on dialysis, you're going to start secreting urea from your stomach. And therefore now the stomach doesn't function very well, because now it has to take over the function of the kidney. And it's not going to be working very well, correct? Because the stomach is a stomach, and now the kidney will evolve in a different way. So you can see how all the organs are really involved, and medicine can suffer a little bit by this specialty, that the doctor will only do this, and the doctor will only do this. But you are a person, and one thing's in there, they're all together. Yes?
We heard a lot about when COVID was in the news for testing the wastewater to see,
Yep.
The occurrence. Was that a new idea, or is testing the wastewater used for other?
No, it's actually, it's an interesting question. So COVID was actually released into the gut. So we know that COVID, we get it through the upper airway and through the upper airway as it flies to you through droplets. And what happens is that many people, instead of developing the lung disorder, they also were affected through the GI tract. Viruses in general, they're able to kind of attach to somewhere part of the body when they found a receptor somewhere that they mimic. So many people actually had more GI symptoms during COVID. They actually had trouble with the lung. In fact, there were many, and that's why the people also, they felt better because they only had diarrhea, or they only had liver diseases. They never really had a respiratory problem, so they never really realized that they had COVID until much later. So that was going into the stool, was able to be present. But actually that thing has been done for a long time, because we are still doing it by looking at the water waste. So I was reading this morning that the beach here in Plattsburgh was closed because of the E. coli that is present in it. So it is a way for us to know how the environment really kind of affects. In that case, the application of using the stool to kind of make a focus, so for example, the college, right? I mean, is there COVID in the college? So it was easy to test it because they all live there, they're all sitting in there. Less likely for the city of Plattsburgh.
Okay, we have obviously moved on from the William Beaumont story, and we're going to call this a wrap. We appreciate Dr. Fedi's continuing research into William H. Beaumont.
Any other question on gastroenterology? I can give you some free advice.
Thank you so much.
Take care.